Hi, my name is Olivia Melsa, and today I'm going to be interviewing a mentor of mine who is a veterinarian. I've wanted to be a veterinarian ever since I was 10 years old because I want to help animals. This is Dr. Davis, a veterinarian located in Georgetown. Dr. Davis, would you like to tell us what led you to become a veterinarian?
Hey, just like Olivia said, I am Dr. Erica Davis, a small animal veterinarian, and I have been mentoring Olivia for the past few years now. She's spent a lot of time with me at 2 different hospitals, shadowing me with surgery and appointments and all kinds of stuff. And just like her, I kind of always knew I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I kind of took a different route. I had 2 different interests in life. I was very interested in space and airplanes, but also loved animals. And so as a kid, I was just naturally pretty decent at math and physics, and so I just decided to go into engineering in college. And so I became an aerospace engineer and worked for the space program for about 8 years. I always had a passion for animals my entire life, and I decided to go back to school to pursue my doctorate of veterinary medicine, and then I became a vet. And so my thought process was either one day I would become a veterinary astronaut or I would just be a veterinarian.
What education and training did you go through to start your career?
So, like I mentioned, my route was a little bit different than others because I was an engineer before I was a veterinarian. And so for me, when I went to college to get my undergraduate degree, I got a bachelor's of science in engineering, in aerospace engineering. And then I later, through working, got a master's degree that was unrelated, and then I continued to take classes. Once I decided I wanted to go to vet school, I took classes, prerequisites, so that I could have all of the appropriate classes that are required when you apply for veterinary school. So a couple of various chemistries and different science courses that I didn't have to take for engineering, I did that when I was working as an engineer. And then I applied to vet school while I was working and then got accepted. But for most people who want to be a veterinarian, they will go to college and they will get a 4-year degree, usually in a science major like biology or microbiology or chemistry or biomedical science, something science related. And then typically, either once they've graduated or during their last year of their undergraduate degree, they will apply for veterinary school, which is another 4 years, just like human medical school. Veterinary medical school is 4 years after regular college. And then after that, when you graduate, you get a doctorate of veterinary medicine, or a DVM. And then at that point, you have the ability to practice as a veterinarian, and you're allowed to do any type of specialization that you feel comfortable and equipped to do, such as surgeries, radiology, cardiology, dentistry, oncology, which is a cancer specialization. There's also an opportunity once you graduate from veterinary medical school. If you just want to specialize in a particular area, you can then go on to do a residency, just like in human medicine, where after vet school, then you do an internship, and then you typically do 3 years of a residency within that specialization that you're interested in, such as cardiology, which is just, you do hearts all day long, surgery, oncology, which is cancer specialization, dentistry, radiology, emergency medicine, preventative medicine, epidemiology, pathology, kind of goes on and on, just like with human medicine.
What are some good schools to go to for this field of study?
Oh man, so that's kind of a tough question. I think that as far as your undergraduate degree goes, as far as the best schools are, there's not really, better schools in terms of if you are taking the appropriate classes and major in order to prepare yourself for veterinary school, as long as you get good grades, then most colleges, accredited colleges, are going to be a good choice. I mean, of course, there are bigger name colleges like in Texas, Texas A&M, the University of Texas, Rice University, Baylor University, Texas Tech. But I will say that a lot of my classmates in veterinary school, went to smaller schools, and that's totally fine. The main point is that you need to have a good GPA in your undergraduate degree. Mostly because that shows motivation, it shows that you can master the subjects, and also, especially if you're applying to vet school in Texas, the vet school at Texas A&M is extremely competitive, and so basically it's a numbers game. The higher GPA and kind of more well-rounded you are in terms of your extracurriculars and your training and experience, the better candidate you're going to be. As far as veterinary schools go, the cool thing about vet schools versus med schools, and you'll hear human medical doctors say this, it is a lot harder to become a vet than it is to become a human medical doctor. And really the reason is there's so few veterinary medical schools. Just in the United States, there's only about 28, versus human medical schools, there's hundreds. And so that being said, really any veterinary school that you get accepted to is going to be an awesome school. There are schools kind of in major states on the mainland of the United States. They're a little bit harder to get into, and then there's some other schools in the Caribbean or overseas in London and in England and all kinds of stuff. So some people will choose some of those other schools if they're having a tough time getting into the vet schools in the United States. And that's cool. It's a cool experience to go live in a different country while you're in vet school. The only downside is that those schools are typically extremely expensive.
What does this career entail?
This career entails so much more than I ever thought it would. Of course, the main focus is medicine and healing, which is super awesome if you're a nerd like me and you love science and you love learning. Of course, it requires or it entails, mastery of a lot of different subjects, because not only are you needing to memorize and know all of the anatomy, on the particular species that you work with. For me, it's cats and dogs, and the occasional, snake or rabbit or guinea pig or hamster or something like that, but mostly cats and dogs. So it entails me knowing about all of their body systems, but it also entails me knowing about all of the medications required for all of the various diseases and ailments. Or it entails me utilizing math concepts when I'm calculating dosages and fluid rates and all kinds of stuff, especially for hospitalized patients. It definitely entails compassion. A lot of people will say that this career is one of the few remaining altruistic careers, in that your whole goal is to help the helpless, help something that's innocent, generally speaking, coming from a very compassionate place. So a lot of veterinarians have bleeding hearts, and they're very compassionate, and they want to not only help animals but help people, because a lot of you know who own animals, they're like your family members, and so when they're sick, it hurts you, it hurts your heart. And so when I get to take care of animals and heal them specifically, or take away their pain in other ways, it makes me feel so good, because I'm helping the animal, but I'm also helping the family. This career also entails you have to be a leader, and that's something that comes with time, and you can kind of learn as you go, but ultimately as the veterinarian in the hospital, you have to make the final call. You have to make decisions all day long, and for someone who is a little bit indecisive like me in my personal life, it can be challenging to just have to make decisions all day long. You have to be able to act fast if there's an emergency, delegate, communicate for sure, because you have to communicate all of the things that you need to do with animals to the owners. You know, that's one of the bummers about veterinary medicine if you're not a people person, is that unfortunately you do have to deal with people quite a bit in terms of the owners, and explaining what needs to be done and getting them to approve it. Also working with your coworkers and your teammates. Teamwork is so crucial, leading by example, all of these things. It definitely entails a little bit of thick skin. Sometimes you'll have to deal with difficult people or difficult situations, sad situations too. I will say most of the time when we have to do something sad, like a euthanasia, which is when we put an animal to sleep to end their pain and suffering, most of the time it is a blessing and a good thing. But sometimes it's a difficult decision and a difficult conversation, and so it entails me having patience, compassion, and understanding of what's going on with the animal's life and the people's life and various different factors. So that's a lot that this career entails, but the cool thing about that is that it is never boring. Every single day is different. You never know what you're going to have to deal with on any given day, and it's not stagnant and it's not boring, that's for sure.
What is the potential salary of a veterinarian?
So, as far as the potential salary for this career goes, it really can vary depending on how much you work. The cool thing, especially for me now, I'm a mom of 2 human kids now, and so that affords me, or being a veterinarian affords me the luxury of working part-time. And so I only work 2 weekdays a week and then 1 Saturday a month, and that it's really a nice schedule for someone who wants to do both being a mom and being a veterinarian. I would say when you graduate from veterinary school, most people just go ahead and start working full-time like I did. I'm not sure what it's going to be whenever you graduate, hopefully more than this, but right now if you were to graduate veterinary school, you could probably expect to, if you were working full-time, which is usually for a veterinarian 4 to 5 days a week, just because it's an extremely emotionally and physically draining job, you'll probably start somewhere between 65 and 70 to 75,000 per year, which is a good salary. And then you just kind of work your way up in terms of, you do typically get bonuses, or you get a pay raise annually. And I'd say, you know, typically when you're 5 to 10 years out of veterinary school, you can easily be making, you know, about 100 to 130 or 140,000 per year. So it definitely can be a very lucrative career, especially if you work full-time, but it can be very exhausting because you also are dealing with texts and phone calls and emails and all kinds of stuff like that.
What are the advantages of this career?
Oh man, there's so many advantages of this career. I can still truly say that I feel so fortunate to be a veterinarian. I love my job. I'm passionate about what I do. It's kind of like a hobby. Like if I were to choose a cool hobby to do, it would be this, which is pretty neat to say if that's your job. Just from having a lot of friends and family, I know that it's really rare to find a job that you absolutely love and that you're passionate about. So that's definitely a huge advantage. When people find out that you're a vet, they love it. They want to tell you about your pets and all their cool growth stories. They automatically feel a bond with you. You know, so if you're on an airplane flying somewhere and the person next to you finds out you're a veterinarian, I mean, you will be talking the entire flight, which is, you know, a cool thing if you enjoy that. And if you don't, then maybe, you know, don't tell that person you're a veterinarian. But people kind of trust you. They look to you as a good person, I guess, because you've chosen a career path that's very selfless, where you're helping kind of the helpless. Of course, like I talked about earlier, helping people. It's, you know, it feels good to help people. When you can heal something, or make something that's very sick better, I mean, that is extremely rewarding. It's hard to put into words, not just from that cool medical scientific perspective, but seeing the emotions turn around in a family that is so devastated that their family member is sick or injured, and you're able to help that pet for them. It's unbelievable how good and cool that is, to be able to help in that way. Other advantages, I think I mentioned that I'm a huge nerd, which means I like learning. Being a veterinarian, you have to kind of commit yourself to lifelong learning, because there's literally no way that you can know everything, especially in the medical field. It's just so complicated, so complex, and so you're constantly learning, you're constantly researching, reading, and then new diseases arise too, which is cool. And so I like that. I think that's an advantage, to constantly challenge yourself, challenge your brain. Also talking with other veterinarians. When I work with other vets, we're constantly bouncing things off of one another to try to help each other with cases. And I find that very advantageous. I love working as a team, learning from other people's points of view, because not everybody's going to do things the same way. And so I really like seeing other people's perspectives, and ultimately it makes me better. So if you like getting your hands dirty and you're not super grossed out by just nasty stuff, I mean, there's going to be all kinds of excrement and gross things. If you're weird like me and think that's cool, that's another advantage. Doing amazing cool surgeries, putting things back together, taking nasty tumors out, going into the guts and taking out, you know, the gross things that dogs eat, and the toys and the toilet paper and all kinds of things that you have to fish out of their intestines. That is really, really cool, and a huge advantage of a job. And just like I mentioned before, one of the best parts is that it's never boring. And you're just doing new stuff every single day. You never know what's going to walk through that door. And for me, if you want, you know, if you're like me and you don't want to potentially get bored in a job, that's a huge advantage.
What are some possible disadvantages of this career?
Yeah, so just like with any job, there are going to be some disadvantages. I would say, you know, first off, the major consideration for even going to vet school is that veterinary school is hugely expensive. If you live in Texas or whatever state that they have a veterinary school, it is very, very, very smart to try to get into that school. You will get in-state tuition. If, like, say you live in Texas and you want to go to Texas A&M, that's going to be the smartest decision for you, because in-state tuition is a whole heck of a lot cheaper than out-of-state tuition at other universities. So I will say a lot of people are so desperate to become a veterinarian that they will apply other places. Like me, even I went to an out-of-state school. I went to Mississippi State, and it can be expensive, especially if you don't have the mind of living below your means while you're in vet school and kind of living as cheaply as possible. Because once you graduate, you can have unbelievable debt that you need to pay off, and that can really, really put a damper on your lifestyle in terms of having to pay back loans every month once you graduate. So that can be a disadvantage of this career. Also, it's difficult to get into vet school, and that's why other people seek, you know, other universities in different countries and stuff like that. I went to Mississippi State because it had a different program. It's a didactic program, meaning it was only 2 years academic and 2 years hands-on. And for me, someone like me who was previously a different career path, an engineer, I was never a veterinary technician. I wanted that. I learned better by a hands-on approach. But I was also very lucky to have a savings built up prior to vet school because I had worked for several years. Another disadvantage is that you're going to have to deal with people who can get emotional because having pets that are sick that they have to spend money on can be upsetting to people. If you don't communicate things very well, you can get on the wrong page with people and they can get upset. So some people find that as a disadvantage. I've found to try to get around that, I'm always trying to explain everything a little bit extra to make sure that we're on the same page to avoid that potential issue. And you do have to deal with sad stuff. So I guess you can see that as a disadvantage. However, 99% of the time, they're very rewarding situations that you're in, even with the euthanasias, which you might think right now are very sad and something that you wouldn't be able to do. Ultimately, if an animal is suffering with an incurable disease and you have a family that is just seeing this animal in pain day after day after day, if you're able to communicate that there's nothing that we can do to cure this disease, and we're called to show mercy on these animals, that euthanasia can actually be a blessing. And so I will say 9 times out of 10 it's actually a good scenario, but of course you're going to see people upset and crying, and those are less fun days for sure. So that can be an advantage and a disadvantage. Thank you so much, Olivia. I have so enjoyed getting to know you and having you shadow me at the hospital. You are so smart. My favoriteest person to come to the hospital with me. I know you're going to continue to do great in high school and in college and in vet school, and you're going to be a wonderful veterinarian, and I can't wait until that happens. And who knows, maybe we'll be able to work together someday. So thank you so much for interviewing me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis, for participating in this interview and telling us what it takes to become a veterinarian.